Despite having many natural resources, the region of Appalachia and its people have long suffered from a poverty rate much higher than that of the United States. Primarily due to outside influence from corporations, the population of Appalachia has never had the opportunity to grow economically due to the extreme exploitation of laborers and resources in the area. Appalachia, in the years before the pandemic, actually slightly decreased the poverty rate in the region. However, there remains a high rate of poverty in the area. The U.S. average for persons living in poverty was 12.6% from 2017 to 2021. In Appalachia, that number was 14.5%. Unfortunately, in nearly one-fourth of all Appalachian counties, however, 20% or more persons lived in poverty during the same period of time. Of all children in Appalachia, 20% were living in poverty compared to only 17% in the U.S. According to the Appalachian Regional Commission, the U.S. median household income is about $70,000, while in Appalachia, it's about $57,000. When it comes to Appalachians with college degrees, only 25% of persons over the age of 25 have one. The U.S. number is 33%. There's clearly a disconnect in Appalachia. The poorest town in Appalachia is Beattyville, located in Lee County, Kentucky. Beattyville's median household income is $15,000, compared to the U.S.'s $53,000, with 41.2% of the population and 48.7% of children living in poverty. Other devastating statistics include Beattyville having a 33% high school dropout rate, as well as only 3.8% of the population having a bachelor's degree. Beattyville is in the midst of some of the poorest places in Appalachia, as that region of Kentucky has long suffered from little to no economical options. Once the few jobs they had from coal left, the region was left to fend for itself. This is where Big Pharma saw the perfect opportunity to begin opening pain clinics that dispersed hillbilly heroin to anyone and everyone they could. Once the people of Appalachia were hooked on the pills, they were never going to get themselves out of this economic disaster forced on them. Beattyville is sadly just another casualty in the greed of capitalism. Unfortunately, Appalachians largely survive off of government assistance. In Appalachia, 13.2% of households receive assistance from SNAP, with 21% of households with children receiving benefits. The numbers get more desperate when you analyze them by state. In West Virginia, 25% of households with children receive SNAP benefits, and 30.4% of Kentucky households do. In the poorest of rural areas in Appalachia, if you're lucky enough to have a job, you might have to drive multiple hours to and from work. Those who aren't lucky enough to hold down a job find themselves doing odd jobs, on disability, or contributing to the opioid epidemic. There simply aren't enough jobs in Appalachia for the people, so they have to make ends meet however they can. So why is Appalachia so poor? To both do justice to the region of Appalachia and to properly tell the story of why Appalachia is poor, you would need more than a novel, which I don't have for you today. In the simplest of terms, however, Appalachia is poor not because of a lack of natural resources, but because of how outsiders have exploited the people and the resources of Appalachia for centuries. You could trace most of the future poverty of Appalachia back to the end of the Civil War. As half of the nation began rebuilding, industrial tycoons keen on the dollar signs they dreamed of from harvesting natural resources set their sights on Appalachia. These industrial leaders and elites came into Appalachia at a time when the people were already struggling simply because Appalachia is a tough environment to survive in. And those people started buying up mountaintops and mining operations all over. As they bought these natural resources, they would bring in outside executives and managers to run the companies. But they didn't run like a company you imagine in today's world. No, these companies ran more like the feudal system that Europe endured for so many centuries. These industrial moguls would build entire cities around their mining operations, even being so vain as to name them after themselves. In these mining cities, also called company towns, every single piece of property, store, and school was owned and operated by the corporation. Even the money they paid their employees wasn't real. Appalachians would work all day and get paid in vouchers from the company, which they could then use to pay their rent, buy their food, or get something from the company store. So not only could workers own nothing, but they couldn't speak up about it for fear of being fired. If you were fired, you were kicked out of your house, and since there were only company jobs in the town, you would essentially have to leave or starve to death. Sure, there were times when Appalachian workers, those of all ethnicities, would try to strike. The corporations would simply deploy the tactics they learned from the North, which was to bring in a militarized police force like the Pinkertons to murder the workers. If you don't believe me, look up the Battle of Blair Mountain. These corporations literally waged war against the American worker. So you have a place where you can't own anything, and you're at the will of a corporation to stay alive. This is what began the economic crisis that would keep Appalachians in a cycle of poverty to this day. In a society where someone not only owns your house, but your very soul, you don't get to make choices for yourself or your family. This is what began to stunt the Appalachian population and lead them down the road to poverty. The schools were designed to teach children how to be laborers. That's it. Any critical thinking was discouraged. Higher education was discouraged. And it still is to this day. Only today they hide it under the guise of patriotism. Then you have the politicians, who could have tried to spend money on infrastructure for the people to give them more opportunities. But rather than give the small former mining town a piece of the budget, most of the money went to improving the big cities where those politicians actually lived. So you had a population that was unable to grow socially as a society, mixed with a lack of proper infrastructure. These were the snowballs that would grow as time went on. Fast forward to the turn of the 20th century, and you have a population of people who never learned how to properly fight for themselves together, and they suffer because they can't get what they need in their communities. They are stunted socially and in desperate search of any way out of the reality they could find. In comes religion. Christian missionaries from the north descended on Appalachia like locusts, forcing their religion on all those who wanted a better life in the afterlife. They promised God's help, but the only thing they did was swindle what hard-earned money these people had left. The final nail in the coffin was when Big Pharma took matters into their own hands, when they saw more opportunities for profit. They saw people with no opportunity and no hope of chasing what little of the American dream was left. Their reality was not a reality any human should have to live in. So what did the pharmaceutical companies do? Naturally, they flooded every small city and town with as many pain clinics as they possibly could. They wanted them to be able to escape reality with their pharmaceutical drugs. So the pharmaceutical companies were offering a different type of salvation than the missionaries were. They offered them medically approved hillbilly heroin, also known as opioids, to distract them from reality. And it worked. The once proud Appalachian population has been reduced to husks of human beings, and the elites continue to profit off their plight to this day.